So happy to be with you this afternoon and really have some time to delve into a pretty personal and sensitive topic. So good job showing up for this. I know that it takes some courage to do that. So this is the but I want to sorta dealing with sexual aversion webinar, and I'm Dr. Pavini Moray. I'm the founder of Wellcelium, and we are a trans and queer-led online learning community, and we teach adults who are longing for healthy connection the practical skills for happy, healthy relationships that stand the test of time. And the first Thursday of every month, we offer a free teaching on relevant topics. And so today we're talking about somatics and sexual blocks, AKA sexual aversion. So you're in the right place. I just really invite you to take care of yourself during the next hour. There will be time for live Q&A. At any point that you have a question, you can put it into the Q&A. Don't put it in the chat. I won't read it there. Put it into the Q&A box. Stick around till the end. And, you know, give yourself the gift of this time. Go ahead, turn off your devices, put them away, close your other browsers. Really let this time be a support and a nurturing space for you, and take care of yourself. So, our frame today is compassion. I personally have dealt with sexual aversion on and off through the years. So I come to this through a personal experience with it. I'm also a somatic sex therapist who specializes in sexual trauma. And so I've worked with many sexually averse clients over the past decade or so. And really what sexual aversion is when your body sets a boundary for you, right? Your body decides that it's not interested in sexual stuff, and in fact is actively protesting against any kinds of arousal, sexual experience, touch, that kind of thing. It's not the same thing as being asexual, right? So this is a point of clarity that sexual aversion comes and goes, right? And sometimes there's a discernible reason and sometimes there's not. Folks who experience sexual aversion typically have this as a result of negative associations with sex, intimacy, due to perhaps past trauma, painful experiences. This is a learned body response, okay? It's not an innate state. People are not born sexually averse. However, some people are born asexual. So just really wanting to clarify that these are separate situations. Sexual aversion is a very, very powerful somatic strategy for protecting oneself against unwanted sexual experience or contact. In short, it's a trigger state, and triggers arise from experiences in our past where our capacity to cope was overwhelmed. And triggers in our body, no matter what they're about, are in effect our brains and bodies caught in time in the past, right? And so it can seem like the catalyst is in the present, but we're actually in the past when we're in a trigger state. And the thing about triggers, I think they get a lot of negative press, but the thing about them is that they exist for a good reason, even if they have outlived their usefulness. Because our triggers definitely ask us to live smaller lives, right? They ask us to try to not get triggered. Don't do that thing so I don't get triggered. But they also point the way to our healing, like what needs to be addressed for the sake of our healing. Sexual aversion is a trigger that can very much inhibit our expression of our sexuality. And shifting any trigger, any kind of somatic trigger, whether it's about sex or not, really is a process that takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes willingness to say hard things, acknowledge hard things, right? So it is shiftable, and it does require trust in your own process, okay? And it can be challenging, of course, when you want if you have a partner and you want to be sexual with them, or you want to be sexual with them and you're not, right? And it's just really important, and this comes back to that compassion, to remember that sexuality is impacted by many factors, right? And when sexual aversion is present, it has come from some wise place. Okay, you're not broken. Your body is just doing its best to really set a boundary. And that's all it is, right? It's just a strategy. So I think the hard thing about sexual aversion is the impact that it has on, or one of the hard things, the impact that it can have on relationships, right? So if you have a partner and they want to be sexual with you and you feel averse, or vice versa, right? They feel averse. It can be a really painful impact in all kinds of things like rejection narratives and pressure and not understanding and missing each other. All that can happen, and that's really common as a result of sexual aversion, for there to be strife in the relationship about it, unless both people are sexually averse, and then it can work quite well. But it's quite common for couples in which one person has sexual aversion, for sex to become an area of high conflict. And sometimes the sexual aversion has actually come out of that relationship. And that's super hard to deal with, right? Just let's real talk it. Like with any kind of partnered somatic change, shifting from sexual aversion into sexual intimacy requires both partners. Both partners have healing to do here, and there's always more that we can do, right? So it's can be a path of great liberation if both partners commit to finding their way through it together. If they can get out of blame and rejection and into, oh, this is an interesting challenge for us to be in as a partnership. So we've talked about what sexual aversion is and what it's not. And I want to just talk about what is healing for a minute, because I think managing expectations to be reasonable is important here, because sexual aversion isn't a problem to be done with. It's not something to have go away, right? Because success isn't getting rid of aversion. Right, this is, if we hold this compassion frame, if we hold that it's important somatic information that your body is sharing with you, then healing looks like learning to collaborate, work with your body rather than against it, rather than saying, oh, you bad aversion, go over there, get out of here, I don't want you in my life. Instead, healing becomes a process of the somatic sensations, the emotions, the stories, all of that getting to exist without judgment, just being information, right? Being like, oh, I'm feeling sexually averse. This is important to stop and pay attention to my body, right? Because the healing means that you're exploring that trigger of aversion in a safe, supported, and structured manner. And it means that you're being safe with yourself by not being mean to yourself about it. When you're doing any kind of trauma healing, what's important is to not go too fast, right? We want to get there. We want to race to the finish line. And with trauma, it's really important to move slowly, to move at a pace that your body can process, so that your body and your brain are trying to catch up to each other, basically, and staying within a neurological window of tolerance where you're not moving too slowly, right? You're not kind of like turning your attention too much away from the thing that you're working on healing, but you're also not hyper focused on it. You're not pushing yourself. You're not trying to get there faster, right? And so this, where is my window of tolerance, right, for the sensations, emotions, stories, is really important. That's part of how the sexual aversion trigger comes into being, is because we're overriding that, right? We're not listening, or we're not able to listen because of non-consensual sex, right? that there's something that has been overridden. And so the slowing down and the listening is just super important. And it's really where the somatic learning can happen. And it's why we work on self-compassion. Folks, at least me personally, and the folks that I've seen in my practice with sexual aversion and shame are like this, right? And so not only am I having the sexual aversion, like, oh God, I hope that they don't put the boobs on me tonight, right? Not only is that happening, but there's also a lot of shame that I'm broken, that whatever. And so those things go hand in hand, and what happens is that you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to tell your partner, oh, I'm noticing some sexual aversion, right? Because you don't want them to take it personally, because you're embarrassed about it, because you're worried that you'll have to do something you don't want to do, right? So that's why this frame of self-compassion, and it's why I invite you to hold this personally for either yourself or any partners that you have who are sexually averse through a lens of compassion, of like, oh, this is here as a wise strategy. The thing with shame is that, like, if you could just, let's say you're somebody who has sexual aversion, and you could just say to your partner, oh, hey, I noticed that I'm doing that thing where I kind of like pull away. I can feel it in my skin. I can feel it in my muscles contracting. I'm really worried that you're going to want to have sex. Like, if you could just say that and it was neutral and your partner was just like, oh, baby, totally, sure, it wouldn't be shameful to talk about it, right? But so there's this kind of self-perpetuating negative feedback loop that happens when we can't name it. So, I think the first thing here is really allowing yourself to feel averse, like you already do anyway, right? You're already having that experience, or your partner's already having that experience. And so what happens if you're just kind about it? Like, oh yeah, there it is, aversion, right? And what happens if you can just start to name it? Feeling aversion, right? That's, I think, really the first place that you get any kind of movement with it is you're not trying to move it. You're just accepting it. You're in acceptance of it. You can stay locked in that conversation if that feels threatening, right? If it feels threatening, like, well, actually, I don't want to move. I want to have something that's protecting me. You can stay in that conversation of like, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to acknowledge it, right? And you get to stay there as long as you want. Like, again, real talk. You do not have to have sex. You do not have to be sexual. This is a choice, right? That you can work towards. But if it feels just like, you know what, I'm done, I don't ever want to do this again, like, that's actually fine. You get to make that choice, right? And if you're like, you know what, actually, I think I do sometimes want to, you get to make that choice too. So the thing with triggers, however, is that they don't feel like a choice, right? It feels like this is just what is. This is, we're compelled to be here. And so how you engage with yourself around aversion is where you have some choice. Do you speak harshly? Do you blame yourself? Do you blame your partner? Do you give yourself permission to make decisions based on the moment? It could just be no, unless it happens in one moment to be yes, right? I think for me at least, one of the really profound learnings from aversion has been opportunities to really try different things and experiment with it and see, what feels nurturing, what feels supportive, collect data on it. And so I'm going to share with you some of the practices and choices that you can experiment with when your sexual aversion trigger gets tripped. And I think just a side note, one of the confusing things about it is it might not always get tripped, right? Like, sometimes it might just be like, totally, I'm available for sex, and other times you're like, oh, hell no, right? Or sometimes periods of your life you're more available, right? In any of that, what's helpful is acknowledgement, the practice of acknowledgement, of naming what is out loud, preferably out loud to your partner. Because this practice of acknowledgement is really a powerful practice of being with the truth. Shame often wants to silence us in this. And so having an agreement with your partner ahead of time, like talking about this not in the moment, that you will share with them when you feel averse, can really help them take it less personally, and it can help you get out of the stranglehold of shame. And it doesn't mean that anything else has to happen here. We're not, I want to be really clear, we're not doing these practices for the sake of moving sexual aversion out of our lives. We're doing these practices to get more information about your body, about your sexuality, right? About how you need to move, what the right speed is for you. So this acknowledging what is practice of being able to talk about it openly, and committing to really being shame-free about it. Like, all right, think about it, because this is something that happens in humans. I think 250 people registered for this webinar, right? And that's just because those are the people who we have reached to, right? So this is something that happens in humans. So therefore, it's normal, it is information, right? And so we can acknowledge it. And if we hadn't all been so socialized to think that we're supposed to want to have sex all the time, right? We might just be like, oh yeah, it's fine, no big deal. So first practice is acknowledging what is. The second practice that I want to invite you into is one of creating safety. And so often folks who do experience sexual aversion have had experiences with unwanted sexual contact, whether that was non-consensual sex, like something happened to them, or if they endured something that they didn't want to endure, right? Like somehow there's been a negative association created with sex, and the personal boundaries around it. So part of creating safety is really reestablishing your personal boundaries, this internal felt sense of safety, right? Like I'm safe. And this means that I'm not going to do anything that I don't want to. I'm going to check in with my body and listen to what my body says. I'm not going to do anything just because someone else wants me to. And that's knowing that, you know, sometimes that happens whether or not we want them to, but assuming that any partnerships you are currently in are based in consent, that you are tuned in to that channel of what is yes and what is no. And you feel committed to expressing that for the sense of creating internal safety. This is, you know, safety as an internal experience is something that is deeply disrupted by traumatic experiences, right? So it's like, if you haven't known embodied safety, you might not even know what that feels like, right? And so that might be a starting place of like, oh, this is the question I'm going to live in. What does safety even feel like for me, right? And the self-trust that has to be built, and this has to be built in everybody, right? Regardless of trauma, because socialization is brutal, just to be honest. And so part of returning to sexual sovereignty means that you're going to uphold your own boundaries, that you're going to figure out what they are, that if you cross them, you're going to acknowledge that to yourself, right? That you're not going to endure anything else. That the sense of self-trust of, hey body, I'm listening, sweetheart, I'm listening. Oh, okay, I feel a contraction against that. I'm not actually going to do that. I'm not going to push through. And I get it, because part of historically creating safety might have been pushing through, right? A different kind of safety. So saying no. And this is a practice, right? It's something that we learn and relearn and make mistakes and iterate on. The practice of saying no, because sometimes we might not know, and we might get into a sexual encounter. We might start like feeling a yes, like I'm here, I'm cool. And then it changes and it shifts, right? And then how do we get out of that situation? How do we change our mind in the middle? How do we give ourselves permission to do that? And this practice, when you're saying no, right? You're saying yes to something else. You're saying yes to self-trust. You're saying yes to being someone with boundaries. You're saying yes to just like really honoring your own body. Yeah. I would say also that we're still in the topic of safety, that developing this inner compassionate part that is accepting and loving towards any aversion that you're experiencing is also deep safety, right? That you're not going to be in there inside of you being all judgy and harsh to yourself, right? That you're willing to be nice inside. Okay, so we've talked about saying no and creating safety and acknowledging what is. Some other explorations here. Are a practice of making a choice. So triggers make us feel like we don't have a choice. We're just like on the trigger train going down the trigger track, right? Sometimes that means that they're in healing, not just sometimes, in healing, there are more and more opportunities for choice, and we see them earlier and earlier, right? We start to be like, oh, there's a choice point. Oh, there's another choice point. And the making a choice, right? Yes, I'm going to continue. No, I'm going to change this. Means that you are attuned to your own needs in the moment. And this might mean that you have to leave a situation, right? It might mean staying and getting curious about your actual experience. It might mean pausing in the midst of intimacy, being like, oh, whoa, I thought I was a yes. Hold on. Can we just hang out here for a minute? Those choice points are often very connected to how resourced we're feeling, right? How much choice we have is really connected with the amount of grounding and resource that we have in that moment. And so again, sometimes we have them and sometimes we don't, right? But when we do have them, when you do happen to, there's the trigger track, I could get on that train, or you know what, I could just step off and I could be over here and I could talk about what's coming up for me with my partner. Again, much more safety is established, right? Because following your impulse, following any impulses in your body, isn't going to lead you astray most of the time, right? So choosing to take care of yourself by leaving a situation is great. It's awesome. Choosing to take care of yourself by staying in a situation is also awesome. Because what I got really interested in personally with the aversion trigger is what comes next, right? So for me, it lands like, oh, I don't want to. Oh, I hope I don't. Oh, right? And I'm just kind of like cringing inwardly. There's a contraction, somatic contraction. There's a movement of my attention away from the moment. And there's a strong sense of like my skin almost coming together to protect me more, right? And no moment lasts forever. No moment lasts forever. And if you want to get curious about what comes after that, right? Like, well, what if I just notice the aversion? Maybe I tell my partner, maybe I name it to myself. I just stay with it. Like, at some point it gets boring, right? You're just like, how long am I going to stay like this? Okay, I have to change that. Okay, what's available now? right? Because I think one of the stories that sexual aversion tells us is it's the end of the sentence. It is the punctuation at the end of the sentence. I'm sexually averse, boom, that's it, done. And it's just not my experience. It's like, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's like there's something that comes after. And so it's that cultivation of the curiosity, like what comes after, right? What comes next? What's the next moment? What's the next experience? What's the next impulse in my body that can lead somewhere new, and it can lead to new choices. I think every client that I've worked with, I hope that that's true, around sexual aversion, that sense of like pulling away is pretty common, right? It's a flight impulse is what it is, right? If we move ourselves out of the situation, and whether that's just like a very subtle internal contraction, or a really big, I'm moving myself out of the frame kind of contraction, right? The thing is that there's a contraction inside. The muscles are trying to help you manage your experience, right? Whether that's to stop the flow of sensation or emotion, or help you get out of the situation, right? Anytime that our muscles are contracting automatically, they're trying to help us. So why do we do this weird thing when that's happening, where we're like, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath, I'm gonna try and relax. How does that work, right? Maybe. What happens if you go the other way with it? What happens if you support the contraction? Oh, I notice I'm contracting. I'm going to let my body do what it wants to do. Oh, I just really feel it, and I can narrate it, right? I'm curling up in a ball right now. I'm turning my head away. I'm moving my shoulder towards. I'm feeling my big muscles tense. If you support the contraction, here's the fear about this practice, is that if I just do this is going to be the end of it, right? But as I said, there's always that next moment. There's always a moment that comes after the contraction gets boring. And so you can actually support the contraction, let your body do what it wants to do. It means physically, emotionally, energetically giving yourself permission for what's already happening. There's a theme here, right, around compassion, like permission, compassion, like this is something that happens to humans. So and it might mean even supporting it by like tensing more, moving out of the room. What does your body want to do, right? And can you follow that impulse and just see with curiosity, like what happens next? This, again, shame can really get in the way here. And so you can be gentle with the shame. You can just be like, yeah, totally, I feel you. I'm going to talk out loud to you, shame, because I'm really going to try and be really sweet with myself during this experience as I'm supporting the contraction. And I feel you, and I'm making a different choice to just get curious. You can just kind of talk like that to yourself, coach yourself through it. Yeah. There's this, it's almost like the corrective is to allow the aversion to be our teacher, right? To allow it to take us deeper into embodiment, to allow it to bring you to new ways of knowing yourself, new ways of expressing yourself, new ways of talking about it, right? This isn't this is just a teacher, and it could be a really powerful spiritual teacher. I know it has been for me, right? Because there are things, emotions that many of us do not want to feel: despair, helplessness, grief, powerlessness. And so the way it works is we turn our attention away from those things, right? And if I don't want to deal with the unresolved, ungrieved grief around my sexual trauma, turning my attention away from it, like getting averse, is a really good way until I'm ready to do some of that grief work. And the timing is at the body's pace, right? We can't force a thing here. And so here's the important thing, is that there's no way to do this wrong, right? Your process is going to be your process, just like my process has been my process. Your partner's process is their process. There's no way to do this wrong if you are willing to hold that sexual aversion is a teacher, and it's your teacher, right? I know that this is probably a really counterintuitive reframe for you, and so take some time with it. Take some breaths, do whatever you need to do, think about it. But there's no, there's no wrong way or right way to do this. It's just your way. So one of the other things I want to just mention, two more things here. One is that professional somatic support can be really helpful in helping you unwind some of this stuff, not in your partnership, right? So if this is something that you're being called to tend to, as obviously you are because you're present here today, there are other types of practitioners, sexological body workers, somatic sex coaches, sexual trauma therapists. There's people who you can do this work on a body level with who aren't going to just pathologize it, right? I don't think that sexual aversion is a problem. I think it's a healthy response to a fucked up situation that you were in. That's what I think. And so like getting support around that is really kind, right? It's a good way to help to understand it that doesn't have the, it allows you to kind of mitigate some of the impact in your partnership. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then the other piece here is, all right, so maybe there are some things that you feel averse to, right? Maybe you do not want to have certain kinds of sex or do certain kinds of intimacy, right? But is it everything? Maybe it is, but maybe not. Maybe there are things that that feel really good. And I think about it like on-ramps onto the freeway, right? If this on-ramp is closed, what are the other on-ramps? Is there another one that that I could use instead, right? Like if full body frontal contact is too much, what's it like to receive sexual attention on your back or on your feet or on your head, or are there things that aren't negatively associated that are still available? And if so, can you use those on-ramps? But again, there's curiosity, right? There's like, what is possible for me right now? Because we're always all redefining sex. Sex is never going to be the same. And so to say that you're averse to sex is like saying that you're food averse, right? Like there's so many different things that you could experience, that you could try, that when we think about food, we think about all these different things, but when we think about sex, we usually think about like one or two or three things, right? So is there a way to widen that definition of what is sex? Where do you sensually enjoy? Where do you creatively express? Where can you make art of your somatic sex trigger, right? It's both and approach of like choosing not to live as small as the sexual aversion trigger demands, while simultaneously honoring the truth, the capacity of your current body, right? And so, if you have a partner and you want to be sexual with them, one of the things that you can do is explore what are the creative outlets, what are the sensual outlets, what are the erotic outlets, how do you like skinny dipping together, or laying under the stars, or like what else is there that feels available? Because it's just like you get to have sexuality on your own terms, and if there are certain things that you just don't want to do, awesome, you don't have to do them. So that's what I got for you today. I know that was a lot, so thanks for sticking with it and listening to it. There's I'm going to take a Q&A in a minute, but there's just a few announcements. So Wilcelium is in the process of creating a course on taking what we just talked about, the sexual aversion stuff, and making it into a experiential course that would be same frame, compassion, possibility, rather than any kind of weird pathologizing, but like a really positive experience of like, okay, how do I want to navigate this for me, right? Not that there's a right way or a wrong way. So stay tuned for that more formal course announcement. The next announcement is that our next free Thursday teaching, first Thursday teaching, is April 1st, April Fool's Day, and it's all about erotic confidence. And you'll be receiving a link to sign up for that. You'll also get this, the recording of this in the next day or two. And we have a request to make of you this month. So while these teachings are free for you to come and enjoy and learn and share, they're not free for us to produce. And we are a very small fledgling company. And so if you have gotten anything helpful out of this teaching, I'd like to ask you to do me a favor, because your recommendation is really important for Wilsilium's support. So what I want to ask you to do is just talk about us, share us. If you see us on social media, share that post, forward an email to a friend, just really, if there are other people who who can really benefit from what we're doing, your word of mouth promotion makes a huge difference for us. And so it's a way that you can create sexual wellness, erotic empowerment, consent culture in the world, is just by spreading the word about us. And we do lots of free offerings. So that's what I want to share with you about that. Those are the announcements. And we have plenty of time now for Q&A. So please type your questions into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you'll get my full attention. And I'll give you everything I have. Okay, here, read the question, and then I'll read I won't read the answer. I'll make up the answer as I go. So, would extreme ticklishness be considered a form of sexual aversion? Well, what I think about ticklishness is that it's your nervous system is responding extremely, right? And I don't know if this is the situation, so I'm just assuming that there's consensual touch and your body is responding with feeling ticklish, right? And I know for me, when that happens, it's there's an edginess, there's a hypervigilance that's present of like, and it's not, I'm not choosing it, right? It's just happening, where I'm like, I'm not settled. My nervous system isn't settled, and it's hard to relax and enjoy and savor, right, in that situation. So I don't know if it's a form of sexual aversion, but I do think that it's information that things are moving too fast, and that the pressure's not right, and that the timing's not right for your system. And so, like, what do you need to do to create the right timing and the right pressure that's going to work for your system? And that's going to take some experimentation. Thanks for that question. Okay. Can you say more about discerning the difference or overlap between asexuality and sexual aversion? Like, if someone has thoughts of kissing and feels immediately attracted to someone physically, but doesn't vision sharing more sexual acts, is that asexuality or sexual aversion, or both? Thank you. I don't actually know. I mean, I think that it's such a personal distinction, right? And I'm not asexual, and I don't have that experience, so I can't personally speak to it. My understanding of it, from working with folks who identify as asexual, is that there is just a real lack of wanting any kind of sexual contact. Often that there's a disgust factor that's present for folks with asexuality, but not everybody who I've spoken to has that. Sometimes it's just like a complete lack of interest, or that doesn't even cross my mind. And I think, of course, there are ways that people who are asexual have sexual trauma too, right? And so it wouldn't surprise me if someone was both asexual and had sexual aversion. It's just different. It's like different source code in your body. So I hope that makes sense. Thanks for that question. Can I say more about what pathologizing entails? Not the dictionary definition, but mine. Yeah, totally. This is a great question. When we're making things wrong about us, like somehow this isn't normal, or this isn't okay, or I'm broken, or I'm sick, right? I really question that medical model of telling us that something that's happening in our body isn't happening for a good reason. And I speak here not in terms of disease, right? I don't want to conflate with that when there's illness present, but there's like this, I mean, I've just heard sexual aversion really pathologized. Like there's something wrong with people who don't want to have sex. And I just don't buy it, right? It's, I think it's a way of shame, allowing us or preventing us from engaging some really interesting questions and some interesting learning. If I'm just resting in that pathology model of something's wrong with me, right? It's like, well, what if, I mean, it's the question I come to is like, well, what if nothing is wrong with me? What if this is just an experience that I'm having, and therefore what is here to learn? Why has my spirit walked me into this schoolroom where I'm going to learn the things that I can only learn here? So that's how I discern curiosity from pathology. Yeah, thanks for the question. I recently realized how much my aversion is linked to internalized homophobia. Yes, totally, 100%. For queer folks, I think, or for many queer folks who didn't receive an appropriate holding environment for their sexuality, what happened is we have taken that into ourselves, right? That something is in some way not okay, right? And that the sex that we are drawn to is bad, wrong, shameful, dirty, sinful, whatever the narrative is. And so, like here again, this is that when we have wired sex with something negative, how it gets wired inside us, and then why would we want to go towards that, right? I mean, obviously why, but because if we want to be sexual, we want to be sexual. But the way that those things get neurologically wired, right, is I think what happens and how it creates sexual aversion even to the thing that that we want. I just read Wanada, I don't know if that's how you say her name, Petrus, her book Blackness and the Stars Between, which delves really deeply, I think, into this internalized homophobia and how it how we shape around it as young people, as young queers. So that might be a good resource. Great, amazing piece of fiction. Okay. How do I know if I'm experiencing sexual aversion or just not attracted to my partner anymore? Yeah, it's a good question. I think the impact on the relationship might be similar. I don't know. But if you're, yeah, I guess my question would be like, how do you feel about sex with yourself? Does that feel interesting to you? How do you feel about sex with other people? Does that feel interesting to you? Or the idea of it feel interesting to you? Do you feel in contact with your eroticism, right? And I don't have a clear answer for you of how to discern that difference. I think it's a painful question to be in. And I think also I might ask, like, is there stuff that's unresolved with your partner, you know, that's a turnoff? Is there stuff that hasn't been aired between the two of you that could be creating an environment that doesn't feel attractive or sexy, right? So that might be, those are some questions to be in. My partner is sometimes not in the moods of having sex. Could it might be my fault or not? This is another lovely question. I think the answer is probably, I don't want to use a blame model, first of all. I don't think it's your fault. Are you contributing? Are you creating situations where they might not want to be having sex? Possibly, right? Often when there's kind of like conflict that doesn't feel just kind of that mundane day-to-day, we're not getting along very well, things are kind of crunchy between us. It can be really hard to feel sexy towards a partner, right? And also people's libido, there's always a libido difference in relationship, always, because you're two different people, right? And one person wants sex more frequently, or one person wants sex less frequently, or one person doesn't want to have sex at all, or one person only wants a certain kind of sex. Like, we're two different people, right? And just like maybe you're 24/7 always in the mood for sex, but probably you want to sleep some point, right? And is that your partner's fault that you want to sleep? Or you probably want to eat at some point, right? So even if you have a very, very high libido, it doesn't mean you're always available for sex, right? There are other things that we have to do in our lives. And so I think there's some conversation here to be had, to talk about it more with your partner. Because if you're feeling like, oh, this is my fault, like I must be doing something wrong, how beautiful it would be to bring it to them and say, hey, can we talk about this? I just want to make sure that I am approaching you the right way for sex, that that we're creating the kind of shared sexuality that we both want. Are you open to talking with me and sharing just some of your experience? And then you get to listen to them and see what's true for them. Because it sounds like there's some communication that could open up here for you. Great question. Thank you. All right. We have time for some more questions. Oh, I love this one. I sometimes feel guilty when I have the urge to masturbate, but don't want to have sex with my partner. Not sure how to make this a question. Yeah, that's so great. And sometimes we want to have sex with other people and we don't want to have sex with our partners, right? Like, that's true too. Like, this is just what is. Yeah, like I think there's such a beauty in our sexual connection with ourselves, or there can be. You know, sometimes we just want to get off, but sometimes we want to use that self-touch to really deeply connect with ourselves. It's a way to bring ourselves home to ourselves. And yeah, sometimes we're just not in the mood to do that with our partner, right? And I've definitely seen a lot of couples where they believe that masturbation is only for when they're not in relationship with someone, that when they're alone, they're single, they masturbate, and then when they're together, they have partner sex, and they don't mix. Or we don't talk about having sex with ourselves with our partner, right? This is a very private, secret thing. And yeah, I just want to offer you that, like, it seems completely normal, natural to me. I often want to masturbate and don't want to have sex with my partner, and sometimes vice versa, right? And like, can it just be how it is for you that day? Yeah, just maybe some more permission there. Can I talk a little bit more about acknowledging the sexual aversion? I've had some unwanted sexual interactions and I've endured and pushed through it. Currently working on the no, but sometimes it's a really big mental rush and I don't understand it. Caught on the hurricane. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everything, my sense of it, everything that we're doing, we're always doing to meet our own need. We're trying to meet a need that we're having, right? So if I'm enduring when I want to say no, I'm doing it for the sake of something. Maybe it's connection, maybe it's belonging, maybe it's some kind of safety. Maybe I don't trust my ability to change my mind yet, and so I'm waiting, until I feel more confident, right? But I'm always trying to meet a need. And the talking about it part, either to ourselves, acknowledging it, I think is a huge step when we start saying to ourselves, like, oh, actually, I don't want to be doing this right now, or I don't want to do this in my life right now, right? It's a huge step of acknowledgement, especially, you really have to look to your socialization here of how are you socialized? What are you supposed to say and think about sex, right? And so being in the practice of acknowledging what is, for me, is where freedom really is. It's I get out of what I'm supposed to do or what I think I should do or who I think I am, my identity, all that stuff, all that noise, and just be like, huh, this is what actually is, right? And it's a very simple and very, very profound practice when we acknowledge the truth of what is to ourselves. And so I think that that's what you're asking about, is because you said I get caught up in the hurricane. So I'm thinking that there's like a way that arousal, like you're in something and you're like, maybe, like, I don't know, maybe this is yes, maybe this is no, but then arousal happens in your body and you kind of get caught up in it. And then after you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe I didn't want that. I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, but I'm just making some guesses here. And so you, at the end of that, you acknowledge what is to yourself of like, oh, my arousal overcame me. Okay. Is there anything I need here? Is there any self-care that I need? Any way I need to take care of myself? Anyway, anything I've learned for next time? Maybe I need to go slower, maybe I need to have checkpoints along the way, to make sure if I have a hard time interrupting a thing that's happening, maybe we're setting a timer and every 15 minutes we're checking in, like, am I still a yes to this? Am I still a yes? Am I a no, right? So building in some structure until you get that no solidly under your feet might be helpful. All right, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Do I have advice for the partners of sexually averse folks on supporting the healing process? I can imagine your partner contracting away from you and leaning into it while you are trying to be intimate would be really hard to experience. Yeah, 100%. It is hard because, of course, you then get co-triggered, right? You're then like, ow, did I do something wrong? Did I cross a boundary? Why don't they want me? Are they coming back? Am I abandoned? Did I do something wrong? Like it can be really cycle like that, and very hard to stay present, very hard to be in the compassion, and very hard to hold that sovereignty bubble of here's me having my experience and there's them having their experience. And this is why that shared commitment to healing is so important, right? Because it's where both of you agree to name it when you notice it and name it out loud to each other. So it's like either them, the partner who's sexually averse, being like, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling averse. We need to pause. Or it's the partner who's not feeling averse saying, oh, I'm curious. I noticed that you're pulling away a little bit. Are you feeling some aversion, or should we slow down? That both of you are holding it together as healing. And as I said before, it's never just one person healing in relationship, right? That's the narrative. I'm the broken one. Ask me how I know this. I'm the broken one. You're the healed one, right? No. Everybody is healing sex in relationship. And so for the partner of the person who has sexual aversion, what is their, it's not one size fits all. It's like, what is their particular healing that they need to do? Where do they need to bolster their confidence, or where do they need to address their attachment wounds? Or like, where does it, because it's like you're trying to find that balance between there you are having your experience and here I am and I have love and compassion for you and everything's all right all the time, right? Which is a tall order, I get it. So the response that's the co-trigger, the response that's created in the partner who's not averse points to their healing, right? Where do I need to focus my attention? Good. All right, last question, and there's so many, and I'm sorry, y'all, that I'm not going to get to these all, but thank you. I'm gonna copy and paste them before we finish and make sure that I have them to ponder. Okay. If your sexual aversion has become triggered after many years of partnership, what's a first step to address this with your partner? Oh, so tender, right? I think the first step is to say, honey, can we talk a little bit? I have something I want to share with you. And obviously doing it at a time when people are well fed, well rested, and there's spacious time. Because like how I hold this is it's an invitation in, right? It's an invitation into the connection. That's actually the second step. The first step is acknowledging it to yourself, right? And you just did that, lovely. And the second step is to, yeah, invite in your partner and just let them know, and let them know that it's like, you know, just like I would tell you if I, you know, if something else shifted with me, if I had a crush on someone, or if I had an injury, I would tell you, I'm going to tell you about this too, because it's important to me to not be secretive, right? It's important for us that I'm not secretive about this. And I know it might be hard to hear it, and we can get through this. We've ridden it out the last many years, and I know we can get through this, but we do need to talk about it. So, oh, y'all, beautiful. So yeah, as I said, we'll be having the course sometime later this year. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, just wanting you to know that we're here for you, that we're trying to create content and curriculum that will really serve you and serve your relationships and serve your lasting love. So thank you so much for your attention and your time today. I know it's a big thing to turn your attention to, and you were very brave in doing that. So thank you for that. I'm Dr. Pavini Moray for Wellcilium, and we wish you breath and pleasure.